Welcome back to another video here on Free Will Photos. Today we're going to make a quick edit of some street photography that I did, and the idea here isn't to recreate the exact same image that you're looking at on the screen. Here's what the before looked like, and here is what the after looks like. But the main goal here is to create an image that represents the same idea. So let's go ahead and reset this to original and we'll get started. Now, obviously, you can see the very first thing that I did was I cropped the image. So we're going to go ahead and hit the letter C. And I have been experimenting with crops, and the 2:1 is my favorite crop for scenes that I think would fit more landscape. All right. Not all scenes, but for landscape scenes, I've been going with the 2:1 crop. Now, for this image, there are a few challenges that I experienced, which is I wanted the word dessert bar to be in the crop, as well as keeping these lines, or I'm sorry, the chairs, kind of interesting in the frame. So in order for me to do that, since the crop is cutting that off, I actually have to pull the crop up. And what that's doing is it's cutting off the leg in the frame here. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit freeform and just pull back this leg. Now, that's not the standard 2:1 crop, but I don't want to lose the leg. And in the original image that I showed you, or at least the final version that I showed you, I left the leg in there. But, you know, I want the leg in here because I think that it helps with the overall balance of the shot. So with that crop in place, I think we're good to go. And you know what? I think I'm even going to make this more proportionate here. But now I'm running into the issue that this isn't going to be the long look. So I like the length of the crop to be larger than the height of the crop. And that's essentially what I have here with the 2:1. So we'll go ahead and commit that and we'll start editing. Now, I shot this image JPEG straight out of the A6700, so I don't have a whole lot of wiggle room to mess around with highlights and things of that sort. But the good news is I think I got the exposure exactly where I wanted it to be. You can see I have a little bit of room over here to the right, but this was a scene shot in the shadows, so I'm not overly concerned about exposing this completely to the right of the histogram. I saved some of that space because naturally there just wasn't any space, anything that's bright in this frame, with the exception of these white backs to the chairs. Now, there is this little speck that I want to get rid of, so we'll just go ahead and use the healing tool for that. I'm just going to go ahead and click over there, and I think that that does a pretty good job. I could probably line this up a little bit better, so I will. We'll do it like that, and no one will notice that that's a thing. And I could go through here and get rid of a bunch of stuff, but I only wanted to get rid of the distractions and maintain as much of a normal look in the image as I possibly can. So let's go ahead and close that out, and we'll zoom back out and we'll continue editing the image. Now, with this, I think I got the exposure exactly where I wanted it, but I think that it's lacking in color just a little bit. So what I want to do in order to prepare for the effects is push up on the vibrance just a bit. And what that does is it helps with just giving a little bit more life to the image. And I think that that's a good idea when it comes to developing your images, especially if you're working with raw images. But with JPEGs, if you're working in the develop tab, use this as like a fine tweak adjustment before you send it over to your effects where you actually style the image. And that's just because with the effects, we get masks. With develop, it's just a slider. And I think I'm going to push the saturation just a little bit as well. And that just gives me a little bit more wiggle room to work with a color enhancer in the effects section. The next thing that I want to do here is kind of take away some of this clinical sharpness. Now, I was using this, not my Samyang. I was using the Sigma 24-70 art, and that lens is really sharp. It's really nice, but what I've been doing with my street photography lately is kind of softening up the look. So what I'm going to do is just pull down on the structure a bit here. And this is more of a perception than it is actually visual. So if I pull this all the way up, you can see the contrast just gets like really crazy, crunchy, if you will. And if I pull it to the left, you can really see it happening in the bricks here. So let me just zoom in a bit there. And if I pull this down, you can see it's just softening up the more... It's just softening up the contrasted edges that are in the image. So that's all that I really care to do in develop. I may come back here and work on a few more items, but for now, that's all that I'm going to do. Now we're going to jump over to effects. And the very first thing is I have to deal with color. Now, color harmony is one of those things I am still learning and I'm experimenting with, but I'm going to do my best to try to explain my idea of how I am approaching this particular image with color. So we're going to start off with the color enhancer. And for those of you who don't know, the color enhancer is just the HSL tool that's found inside of Lightroom, Luminar Neo, any real photo editor will have an HSL, and that's what the color enhancer is. Just has a few more tools here, but I'm going to minimize those extra tools so we can focus in on just the simple section of the HSL. I'm on the red channel, and the way that I am understanding color theory is to balance the colors as best as you can. So 60-30-10 is kind of the idea. Now, I'm getting this from a YouTuber named Martin Schrader. I think I'm saying his name right. I'll leave a link to the video that I watched to kind of understand more about this color theory. And if that's something you're interested in, definitely suggest watching that video just to get an idea to get started. But the idea here is to take 60%, or the color that takes up 60% of the image, which is a majority of the image. Don't worry so much about the numbers. At least that's how I'm interpreting that, which in this particular case is the red bricks here. All right. And red seems to be very dominant in this image, so that's the majority. The next color that takes up a large color space in this image is going to be this green here. Now, between red and green, those are complementary colors, and I think that many people are probably aware of that. The idea is to desaturate or separate the luminance and saturation values of the primary and secondary color. Now, in this particular image, I'm not entirely sure what that 10% color is. I think I would say it's the chairs. And, you know, you could argue that it may not be the chairs. It might be this red reflection here. I'm not sure, but I don't want any attention drawn to that red reflection. The chairs are the subject. And then you have this window in the background that's helping tell the story with the leading lines, I'll say, into the chairs. So that's kind of how I want to tailor this image. So lots of talking. Let's go ahead and dive into what I'm actually going to do here. So first thing is I'm on the red channel. I'm just going to go ahead and pull down the saturation. And the way that I like to do it is I like to desaturate the color all the way. And that just helps me see what's actually happening in the image. Like these chairs have a little bit of that red in it, but not a whole lot. And all I have to do is mess with this range. And, you know, if I pull this down, you can see it starts to bring back some of the color in the chairs, I should say, and also some of the red that's in the bricks here. So the range slider is kind of like a gauge of how much red do you want ON1 to look for in your image. And then everything else is how do you want it to impact it once it finds that. So prior to getting edit color, which is going to be another tool that I may explore, prior to getting edit color in ON1 Photo RAW 2025, this was our method of trying to fine tune each of these color channels. All right. So now that I've kind of toned in or fine tuned, and maybe I'll pull it up just a bit more. Now that I've kind of fine-tuned what I'm defining as red in the image, I can go ahead and pull back on the saturation to bring this all back in. Now, another way that I like to do this is desaturate the whole photo, but I don't think that I need to do that for this particular image because I kind of already worked on it, but that's another way of visualizing how the color is impacting in the image. And then the next thing that I want to do, because red is dominant, it's going to be, all throughout the image. I'm just going to go ahead and pull down on the brightness. And what that does is it makes it turns it into the base or the anchor color. All right. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see I've now set the tone. And the tone is this brownish red looking color. And yeah, the chairs are kind of being impacted by that. And I have a way of working with those independently. But for the most part, I think I have the tone of the image set pretty well. So now it's time to do something with these greens in the background. And just by pulling down the luminance, I've already separated the saturation and luminance values. So the colors are looking a little bit more balanced in the image, but with the greens a little too heavy for the amount of saturation that I took out of the red. Now I can just push back a little bit more saturation and that kind of balances the two out. And this is all subjective, but hopefully that makes some sense. And then of course I could just pull it back out and come over to the yellows, because if you don't know, green and yellow, they share a lot of the same spectrum. So if I come to the yellow channel and I pull out the saturation, look at how it's impacting those trees. And if I move the hue of the trees over towards green, they become a little bit more pure green. And that could be what you want. That may not be what you want. You got to be careful not to make them like radioactive green. But I can pull this back and maybe make it a adjustment of 10. And if I heavily saturate it, you can see what's happening here. But if I pull this down, everything starts to look like it belongs and it's believable and it's in balance. Now, remember, I darkened the reds already. So I don't really have to do much with the brightness of the greens. I could bring them down a little bit further if I really want to articulate that shadow filling in the photo or that shadowy look in the photo, then I can definitely just pull down on the brightness. And then I could also pull up on the brightness. Now, I didn't define the range of yellow just because I don't think that there's much else that's really being impacted. There's some oranges up here, but I'm not worried about those. And then there's this yellow fence, and I'm also not worried about that. I think that the adjustment is working just well. We're just fine. And then, of course, I can come over to the greens and really just fine tune how that green is being saturated. So what I find in green is, at least in trees, I won't say in green, but in trees that are mostly to the eye, they look green. Yellow seems to have a deeper impact than green does. Because if I desaturate this, look, there's still some green and there's still some color in there because that's coming from the yellow channel. So play around with yellow if you find yourself struggling with green trees. Yellow may be the color that you really need to work with, not green itself. So all that being said, I think I will desaturate these greens just a little bit because I don't need the greens to be strong because, again, the subject is here. All I'm doing is trying to set the tone for the overall image. So if I hold the backslash key, you can see this is where we started and this is where we've gotten so far. And this isn't like a dramatic change. It really isn't. This is a very subtle change, but it is a change that's helping to refine and define the image as a whole. So the next step is going to be adding in a little bit more color right here in the center. The way that I do that is with another color enhancer. Now, to make sure that it looks very clean, I am going to practice renaming these. So this is going to be overall color shift. And now we're going to add in a second color enhancer. And this one, I'm going to use a mask that I don't use very frequently. And this is going to be a vignette color range mask. So I'm going to hit M on my keyboard in order to get my masking bug. And color range is already selected because, again, I did use this already. But if you are not familiar with this, what ON1 allows you to do is you can grab either one of the vignette tools, or the gradient tools, I should say, and you can add in a color range. I don't think reflected gradient. Oh yeah, reflected gradient is in there. So you can grab any one of these. And what I want to do is protect the edges of my image and only apply this to the center. So I'm going to click edges. Whenever you choose a shape, you have to ask yourself the question, where don't I want this effect to go? And I don't want it to go into the edges because I want it to go into the center, and that's going to give you the right mask. And then I'm going to activate the color range mask. And now it works very closely like a normal radial gradient. So if I go ahead and click right here, you can see I get a radial gradient, and I'm just going to make a very crazy adjustment so we can see what's happening. And so it's pretty large, and you can tell that it's not going everywhere. It's just going in some places. What ON1 is doing is it is sampling the color that is underneath the large circle at the center of the radial gradient. So if I click the properties here, you can see it's just sampling this chair. Now, I could use the eye picker tool to resample, or I can just come over here. Let's go ahead and hit the letter M, get my masking bug back, and I can click and drag this around. Now, where you can choose how aggressive it's selecting is by coming up here to this little number, and you can pull that to the left, and you can see it's very, very meticulously selecting that maroon looking color. And then I can pull it to the right, and it's just going to pick up anything. So you got to play around with this for your image. And I like to, again, make very, very drastic changes so I can see it in real time on the image. Another way of looking at this is I could hit the letter O on my keyboard and I get the masking overlay, and this works well also. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter O again. And I think I have a good selection, or at least a color that I'm selecting. But what I need to do is really fine tune it to kind of fade for the look that I'm going for. So I'm just going to go ahead and shrink this mask down by pulling in on the handles, and then maybe even pulling out just a little bit there and rotating this around. And then I'm going to pull up on the feather handle so that way it spreads just a little bit better, a little bit more evenly. And I'll hit the letter O just to take a look at the mask. Anything that's white in a mask means that the effect is applying there, and anything that's black means that it's not going to apply there. Now, I'm still getting some bleed over here, and there's a way of fixing that. I can fix that later. But now let's just go ahead and do the adjustment that I want to do and see if anything needs to be corrected. So the first thing that I want to do is just throw up the vibrance and push the saturation. Now, this is a extremely subtle adjustment, and you can see the difference if you just look down here in the bricks closest to the wall, right under the chairs in the transition zone. You can see that there's more red on the ground, but what it's doing is it's giving a little bit more life to the chairs that were desaturated. And if I turn this off and turn it back on, it's again, very subtle, but I'm bringing back some of the life into the chairs that it lost when I made the initial selection of reds. Now, if I wanted to crank this up just a little bit more, what I can do is turn up the volume on my saturation for the overall image, and you'll see the whole image is going to become more saturated. And in return, it's going to keep those chairs balanced. So this is a more finite method of tuning those chairs. And, hopefully with YouTube compression, it's actually coming through. But I promise it is one of those things when you do it on your own computer, you're going to see it and it's going to make a ton of sense. All right. So now that I have that adjustment made, I'm ready to move on to my next adjustment, which is going to be working with a little bit more tonal values in the overall image. So I can hit add filter again, and I'm going to go with a tone enhancer. And what I want to do here is build some contrast in the photo, so that way it kind of looks a little bit more interesting. The way that I'm going to do that is by using the curve tone that's built into the tone enhancer. I'm just going to pull down on the curve just a bit here and pull up on the highlights. So I pulled down on the shadows and I pushed up on the highlights, and you can see that S curve. It's a very basic move with a tone curve, so I didn't do anything earth shattering, but it did add in some contrast. Now, this is a little heavy handed for what I was going with. And you can see that when you add in contrast, it actually brings back a little bit of that saturation in the image. And I worked so hard to get that out of the image. So I'm just going to pull down on the opacity slider because I just want a little bit of contrast. And you're probably wondering, well, Chris, why did you use a tone enhancer if all you were going to do was use the curve? Why didn't you just grab a curve tool? Well, the next step of what I want to do for this image is, remember I talked about getting rid of some of that clinical sharpness from the lens. Well, the detail slider, if you pull this to the left, you add in a little bit of negative detail. And if I pull it all the way to the left, it doesn't look very good. But as I pull this up to the right, I can bring back some of that detail to taste. And this is a stylistic choice. You may not even want to do this, but I personally enjoy doing this. So I like to take down the detail just a little bit, not too much, just enough to make the photo look soft focused. I think that our lenses are a little sharper than they really need to be today. So it's good. It's a good problem to have, but I kind of like the idea of things being a little bit softer in some images, not all, but this one, I definitely want to do that. So if I turn this off, turn it back on, again, subtle adjustment, but it's helping with the cohesion of the complete image, at least for my creative perspective and idea. The next step is I'm going to throw in a glow filter. And the glow filter is just a fun filter to add to an image. It's also going to add in a little bit of contrast if I work with it in this regard. There's some styles that you can test out. So the ON1 has 3 that they give you access to at the top of the window. I like normal. Normal seems to work really well here. But if you click this more, and this holds true for pretty much all of the filters inside of ON1, if you hit more, you get access to a few more options. Now, depending on how they're built, it may be a smaller list, or it could be a larger list. But all in all, you can just kind of cycle through these and see what you like on your image. And if you like something, you just select it. Like, I actually enjoy this deep forest look on this particular image. I'm not going to go for it, but I do enjoy that. The diffuse glow, dreamland isn't too bad. I'm, really enjoying a lot of these looks, and everything that is between angel glow and white soft no darks are all included with ON1 Photo RAW. The 2 at the top are the 2 that I've made for myself, and these are presets essentially, but it's only for the glow. So you can create your own if you find yourself doing the exact same tweak and you want to apply that to a range of images. You can definitely click FWP glow, or you can create them and then come down to the bottom and hit save new style. And then you name it, and there you go. So maybe I want to go with the FWP Glow 2, which is my own glow. And if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see what it's doing to the image. And I actually like that a little bit more than normal. So I'm going to go with it. Now, the next step is I want to balance the colors a little bit more. And I've shown in a video previously the color balance tool. Now, you could definitely use this, and I'm not against the color balance, but what I've been enjoying in a lot of my artistic work, if you will, is using the split tone filter. And the reason why I enjoy the split tone filter is because I only have to focus on highlights and shadows. But more importantly, if I know that there's a specific color, I can double click this box and I can put in a hex code. Now, that sounds like something really bad, but essentially a hex code is like a GPS coordinate on the larger color wheel to pinpoint a very, very specific color. And it's a very powerful tool. Now, if you're on a Mac, you can access this by clicking on the second icon to bring up the sliders or the color sliders menu. And then you select the RGB sliders inside of the drop down here. And then down at the bottom, you get access to the hex colors. All right. Now, I'm not going to work with a very specific color today. Instead, I'm going to experiment. And the way that I experiment is with the color wheel. So I selected the highlights, and I like to really look at my highlights. So I'm going to bring up the luminance value by pulling this slider to the left all the way. And then I'm going to grab this little crosshair and I'm going to move the colors around. And you can see how this is impacting just the brightest areas of the image. It's adding in a nice color overlay, if you will, but it's also matching the luminance. The reason for that is with the split tone filter, you get a blending mode, and the split tone filter, at least when I open it by default, it uses the color blend mode. And what that means is it's going to find based off of what you specify. So here, the highlights, it's going to find the brightest areas of the image, and then it's going to apply this color, but it's not going to change the luminance values. And this is the reason why I really enjoy using the split tone filter. It's just so much easier than the color balance tool. And the color balance tool definitely has a place in the arsenal, but the split tone filter is just so much easier. And essentially what I'm looking for is a warmer tone in the highlight area. Now, if you were to take a line and cut this color wheel completely in half, you have warm tones on the right side and cool tones on the left. And, you know, I'm just giving some very basic color theory. Definitely recommend that you watch the video that's in the link below or in the description box below from Martin Schrader, because he does a really good job at explaining this. And the main thing here is, though, I want to warm up my highlights, because that's the overall tone that I want to apply there. So yellows, reds, even these pinks, even though pinks get a little bit closer to the blues, it's still an option. But I'm going to stay somewhere over towards what you would normally see in a sunset. Not that there was a sunset, but I'm going to go more towards the yellow orange hue. So maybe somewhere around there. And then what I'll do is just pull back a little bit on the luminance value so it's not overpowering that area. And I'm going to set that as good. So now I have my highlight color set the way that I would like my highlight color to be. It's time for me to set a shadow color. Now, shadows are by default cooler. And right now it has a blue tone, which is on the left side of the color wheel here. So that means it's going to be a cooler tone. It's really that easy when it comes to identifying colors and color theory. So if you're intimidated by color theory, don't be. Even if all you understand is on the color wheel, the left side is cool and the right side is warm, you apply the colors to your image as you see fit. If you want the image to be a little bit more cooler feeling, then put more colors on the left side into the image. And if you want it to be a little bit warmer feeling, put more colors on the right side into the image, and that will naturally happen. So there's color theory summed up in a nutshell. but I'm going to go with something that is maybe just a little bit more purplish blue. So close to purple, but a little bit more towards the blue side. So maybe somewhere around here. Now, that is way too bright, and it's also overpowering, and it's changing the red hue that we had in the bricks here, so it doesn't look natural. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pull down on the luminance value so it's a little bit darker, and you see how that starts to bring back that natural red. Well, that's perfect. Now, the other reason why I love using the split tone filter is because I can now tune the amount of how much I want that color into the highlights. Right now, these are both even. If I pull up on that golden brown or golden looking color, I'm adding more of that into the highlights. So I'm really starting to balance out this image a little bit. And I haven't even gotten to the balance slider, which I'll explain here in a little bit. But what I can also do is pull up a little bit more and add in some of this purple. Now, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. If you like what you see on the screen when you tweak it for the first time, you're good to go. But in this instance, what I'm seeing is the image is overpowered by that shadow tone because, again, this was a darker shot image. What I want to do is lean the image more towards giving favor to the highlight color. To do that, all I'm going to do is drag this balance slider over to the right, and you'll see how the balance starts to shift, favoring more of that golden color. But I'm still keeping that purple look in the image overall, and I'm getting that shadowy feel that I had in the original image. Now, this is making the photo just a little darker than I would expect it to be. So what I'll do is just pull back on the opacity, and it's going to bring back some of that original image, and you can see how it just makes the image a little bit brighter. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see how the split tone is really giving a nice color grade to the image. And if I wasn't explaining it, I would have been done with that a long time ago. So it's really, really fast. I don't have to guess too much like I do with the color balance. I would love the color balance to get these little boxes so that way I can work with the actual color wheel that pops up. It's a little bit larger, and I also have the ability to add in a hex code, but maybe that'll be in a future update. I know that ON1 just updated the color balance. So the next step that I'll probably do here is throw on a border just as a finishing touch, because why not? And I'll scale it down just a little bit. No, -9 seems to be my standard look, so I'll go -8 just to change it up for the day. So here is the final look that I think we're going to go with. And here is the initial look that I came into ON1 minus the crop. Obviously, this is the crop, or this original look is cropped. And here's the final edit. If you found value in the video, go ahead and smash the like button. If you're new here, consider subscribing to get more content about ON1 Photo RAW. If you got questions about using the software, leave it down in the comment section below, or maybe consider signing up for a coaching call with me. You can do that by clicking the link in the description box below. If you want to save some money when you shop over at the ON1 website, consider using my coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. And until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.